Imagine winning the biggest electoral landslide in a generation, walking into Downing Street just 17 months ago with a massive majority and the entire country seemingly behind you, only to discover that by Christmas the following year, half the British public expects you to be gone within 12 months. Not might be gone, not possibly could face challenges, but genuinely expect you will not make it to next Christmas as Prime Minister. That is the absolutely brutal reality facing Keir Starmer right now, according to devastating YouGov polling that found 50% of voters believe he is spending his last Christmas in number 10, including 19% who are definite about his political demise. Only 35% think he has a chance of surviving until the next festive season, which means nearly two-thirds of the country either expects him gone or is unsure he will last. This is not the normal political turbulence that comes with governing. This is a prime minister whose authority has collapsed so completely that voters are already planning for his replacement. The growing sense of doom surrounding Starmer is a stark, almost tragic contrast to his triumphant arrival in Downing Street, and the government's misery just keeps deepening with yet another humiliating U-turn on the inheritance tax raid on family farms just days after Starmer insisted it was sensible policy. Quick favor. If you are absolutely gripped by the spectacular political collapse happening in real time, smash that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you watching have not subscribed yet. It is completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you these incredible moments where British politics implodes in the most dramatic fashion possible. Cheers if you did. Now back to Starmer's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year. Let us start with that polling because it is genuinely extraordinary and tells you everything about where British politics is right now. When YouGov asks the public whether they think the current Prime Minister will still be in office a year from now, you would normally expect most people to say yes, especially if that Prime Minister won a landslide election relatively recently. The default assumption should be that Prime Ministers who have just won big majorities tend to stick around for at least a few years. But not in Starmer's case. Half the public expects him gone within a year. That is not a vote of no confidence. That is a collective judgment that his premiership is already essentially over and it is just a matter of time before the inevitable happens. The 19% who are definite about his demise are particularly striking. These are not people who think he might struggle or could potentially face challenges. These are people who are absolutely certain he will not make it. They have looked at his performance, looked at the polls, looked at the discontent within his own party, and concluded that there is no way Starmer survives another year. That level of certainty about a sitting prime minister's political death is genuinely rare and genuinely damaging because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If enough people believe you are finished, including your own MPs and ministers, then you probably are finished because nobody wants to hitch their wagon to a sinking ship. The comparison between Starmer's triumphant arrival in Downing Street 17 months ago and his current dire situation could not be more stark. He won a landslide election victory that gave Labour a massive parliamentary majority, the kind of mandate that prime ministers dream about. He had the political capital to implement virtually any agenda he wanted. The Conservative Party was in disarray after 14 years in power and a series of leadership disasters. The country seemed ready for change and willing to give Labour a chance to deliver it. Starmer had everything going for him, and somehow, in less than a year and a half, he has managed to squander all that goodwill and political capital to the point where voters are planning for his departure. The government's misery, as if things could not possibly get worse, deepened further today with the announcement of another humiliating U-turn on the inheritance tax raid on family farms. This comes just days after Starmer stood in Parliament and insisted the policy was sensible, necessary, and would not be changed. The speed of the U-turn is almost impressive in how quickly the government went from defending the policy to completely reversing course. It suggests either that they genuinely did not understand how unpopular and problematic the policy was until the backlash hit, or that they understood but hoped they could tough it out and eventually cave when the pressure became too intense. Neither option reflects well on the government's competence or political judgment. Despairing Labour insiders, and the fact that Labour insiders are openly described as despairing tells you everything about the internal mood of the party, have complained that the leadership seems to have learned nothing from the debacle over the winter fuel allowance and the abortive effort at benefits reforms. This is a really damning part because it suggests a pattern of behavior rather than isolated mistakes. The winter fuel allowance cuts face massive backlash and had to be partially reversed. The benefits reforms face opposition and had to be watered down. Now the farm's inheritance tax has been U-turned. The government keeps announcing policies, facing opposition, and then climbing down. It is a cycle of incompetence and weakness that is destroying whatever credibility Starmer had left. Labour insiders are now braced for yet another climb down on business rate increases, which have been so unpopular that Starmer and other Labour MPs have actually been banned from pubs across the country. Let that image sink in for a moment. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom cannot go to certain pubs because the landlords have banned him over his government's policies. That is not normal political unpopularity. That is visceral anger from small business owners who feel they have been betrayed and are making their feelings known in the most direct way possible. When publicans are literally putting up signs saying the Prime Minister is not welcome, you know you have a serious political problem. Labour Party Chair Anatoly tried to inject some confidence into the situation by telling Sky News at the weekend that Starmer would absolutely still be Prime Minister next Christmas. But that statement, meant to sound reassuring and confident, actually has the opposite effect because it reveals that the question is being asked seriously enough that senior Labour figures feel they need to answer it. When you have to go on television and insist that your leader will definitely still be in post a year from now, it rather suggests that plenty of people think he might not be, and you are trying to shut down that speculation before it becomes overwhelming. The names being circulated as potential successors tell you that speculation about a post-Starmer Labour Party is not just media gossip, but serious discussion within political circles. Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, and Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham are increasingly seen as on manoeuvres, which is political code for they are positioning themselves for a leadership bid. These are heavyweight Labour figures with serious political bases and genuine credentials to be Prime Minister. The fact that all three are actively preparing for the possibility of Starmer's departure suggests that inside the Labour Party, people are reading the same polls as everyone else and drawing the conclusion that Starmer's time might be limited. The timing could not be worse because Starmer is looking down the barrel of potentially apocalyptic local elections in May. The polls suggest Labour could face catastrophic losses, particularly in Wales where they might lose the First Minister position for the first time since devolution, and in traditional Labour heartlands where Reform UK is surging. If those elections go as badly as the polls suggest, the pressure on Starmer from his own MPs will become enormous. Labour MPs who are facing the prospect of losing their seats at the next general election will be looking for someone to blame, and the obvious target is a leader whose policies and political judgment have led them to this dire situation. The broader economic pessimism revealed in the polling is equally concerning for the government. Just 15% of voters are hopeful their own financial situation will improve over the next year, while a whopping 40% expect things to get worse. That is a devastating assessment of the government's economic management and the direction the country is heading. When only 15% of people are optimistic about their personal finances improving, you do not have a cost of living problem. You have a complete collapse of economic confidence. People are looking at the government's policies, looking at their own bank accounts and wage packets, and concluding that things are going to get worse before they get better, if they get better at all. 39% anticipate little change in their financial situation, which might sound neutral but is actually quite negative in context. If things are already difficult and people expect little change, that means they expect to continue struggling. It is not like people are currently comfortable and expecting things to stay comfortable. They are currently struggling and expecting to continue struggling. The government's entire pitch was about making people's lives better, about delivering growth and prosperity, about ensuring hard-working families could get ahead. If only 15% think that is actually going to happen, the government's entire economic narrative has failed. The one piece of moderately good news for Labour in the polling is that Reform's advantage on headline voting intention has narrowed from 10 points to 5. That is still terrible for Labour because being 5 points behind Reform UK, a party that only recently got serious about contesting elections and has never been in government, is historically unprecedented and deeply embarrassing. But at least the gap is closing rather than widening, which gives Starmer's allies something to cling to as they insist the situation can be turned around. They will be watching closely to see if that trend continues in the new year, hoping that it represents the beginning of a Labour recovery rather than just statistical noise. The details of the farm's inheritance tax U-turn are worth examining because they show how poorly thought through the original policy was. Under Rachel Reeves' plan unveiled in the 2024 budget, farmers face paying inheritance tax at a 20% rate on agricultural property and land worth more than £1 million from April. That triggered a huge wave of protests in London, Those dramatic tractor demonstrations that brought Westminster to a standstill, and a significant backlash from Labour MPs in rural seats who understood that their constituents were furious. In the government's latest U-turn, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs today lifted that threshold to £2.5 million, admitting that it had acted after listening to concerns of the farming community. That phrase, listening to concerns, is political code for we completely misjudged this and are now desperately trying to fix it. A DEFRA spokesman said the change would halve the number of farms affected by the change to agricultural property relief, which rather raises a question of why they did not do the analysis properly before announcing the policy in the first place.